Danny Carter was having a bad day. Actually, he had been having a bad 3 months. Ever since the United Earth Fleet had assigned him to the diplomatic vessel Starbound Hope. He was a junior liaison officer, which sounded important but really meant he spent most of his time fetching coffee, organizing schedules, and trying not to embarrass humanity in front of alien species. The ship was currently hosting a delegation from the Cathari Empire. Danny had read the briefing files at least 12 times. The Cathari were a warrior species, proud and ancient. They stood 7 feet tall on average, with scales that shimmered in different colors depending on their mood. They had 4 arms, each one strong enough to crush a human skull without much effort. They did not smile, they did not joke, and they definitely did not appreciate being disrespected. Danny was sitting in his small quarters, trying to send a message to his friend Pete Dawson down in engineering. Pete had been complaining for weeks about how cramped his room was, and Danny had finally thought of the perfect joke. He typed quickly, not really paying attention to the screen. "Come to my chamber. I've got something to show you." It was their running joke. Danny's quarters were even smaller than Pete's, and the idea of calling it a chamber was hilarious to both of them. He hit send without looking and leaned back in his chair, waiting for Pete's response. His device made a strange sound. Not the normal message sent sound, but something different. Danny looked down and felt his stomach drop into his feet. The Universal Translator app had glitched. Instead of sending the message to Pete Dawson, it had sent it to the last contact Danny had viewed. That contact was Ambassador Velanara of the Cathari delegation. Danny stared at the screen. His hands started to shake. He had just sent a message to an alien ambassador telling her to come to his chamber. According to everything he had read about Cathari culture, a direct summons to someone's private space meant one of 2 things. It was either a challenge to combat or an invitation to courtship. Either way, Danny was probably going to die. He jumped up from his chair and started pacing around his tiny room. Maybe she hadn't seen it yet. Maybe he could send another message explaining the mistake. Maybe he could run to Captain Morrison and beg for help. Maybe he could hide in the cargo bay until the Cathari left. His door chimed. Danny stopped breathing. He looked at the door like it was a bomb about to explode. The chime sounded again, and he knew he couldn't ignore it. Slowly, feeling like he was walking to his own execution, he pressed the button to open the door. Velanara stood in the doorway. She was even more impressive up close than she had been during the formal meetings. Her scales were a deep purple color, shifting to silver at the edges. Her forearms hung at her sides, perfectly still. Her golden eyes looked directly into Danny's soul. "Human Danny Carter," she said. The translator gave her voice a musical quality that seemed wrong for someone so terrifying. "I have answered your summons. What do you wish to show me?" Danny opened his mouth, but no words came out. His brain had completely stopped working. Here was one of the most powerful members of an alien warrior species, standing in his doorway, waiting for him to explain why he had summoned her to his chamber. Velanara did not wait for an invitation. She stepped into his quarters, and Danny had to move backward to avoid being knocked over. She looked around the small room with what might have been curiosity or might have been disgust. It was hard to tell with Cathari. "This is your chamber," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Danny managed to say. His voice came out as a squeak. "It is very small." "Yes." Velanara turned to face him. Her crest of silver spines rose slightly, which the briefing file said indicated interest or alertness. "You summoned me here. This is a significant action among my people. I would know your intentions, human." Danny's survival instincts finally kicked in. He held up his hands in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. "There's been a mistake. A terrible mistake. The message wasn't meant for you." Velanara's golden eyes narrowed. "You did not intend to summon me?" "No, Yes. Danny took a deep breath and tried to organize his thoughts. I was trying to send a message to my friend. The translator app on my device malfunctioned. It sent the message to you instead of him. For a long moment, Bellinara said nothing. She simply stared at Danny, and he was absolutely certain that he was about to die. He thought about his parents back on Earth. He thought about his sister and her kids. He thought about all the things he had never done and would never get to do. Then Bellinara made a sound. The translator rendered it as laughter, but it sounded strange and hollow, like wind blowing through an empty cave. Danny realized he had never heard a Cathari laugh before. According to the briefing files, they rarely did. You are either very foolish or very brave, human, Bellinara said. My people have killed for lesser insults than a false summons. I'm definitely going with foolish, Danny admitted. There was no point in pretending otherwise. He expected her to leave. He expected her to be angry, or at least annoyed. Instead, Bellinara walked over to his small bunk and sat down on the edge of it. Her forearms folded in a way that seemed almost relaxed. Tell me of this friend you meant to summon, she said. Tell me why humans send such messages in jest. Danny blinked. This was not how he had expected this conversation to go. You want to know about human jokes? I want to understand, Bellinara said. My people do not joke. We do not understand why other species find humor in things that are not true. You sent a message calling this tiny space a chamber. Your friend would have found this funny. Why? Danny slowly sat down in his chair, still keeping a safe distance from the alien ambassador. He thought about her question carefully. How did you explain humor to someone who had never experienced it? It's funny because it's ridiculous, he said finally. This room is so small that calling it a chamber is obviously wrong. The difference between what I said and what's true is what makes it funny. It's like we laugh at the gap between reality and expectation. Bellinara considered this for a long moment. So humor comes from lies? Not exactly. More like exaggeration, or irony, or just pointing out how absurd things can be. Absurd, Bellinara repeated. This is a human concept I do not fully understand, but I find I wish to learn more. She settled back on his bunk, clearly not planning to leave anytime soon. Danny realized that his terrible mistake had somehow turned into something else entirely. He was about to spend the evening explaining human humor to an alien warrior princess. Life on the Starward. Hope had just gotten a lot more complicated. The next morning, Danny woke up expecting everything to be normal again. The strange evening with Bellinara would just be a funny story he could tell Pete over drinks. Life would go back to the boring routine of fetching coffee and organizing meetings. He was very wrong. When Danny walked into the mess hall for breakfast, he noticed that people were staring at him. Not just looking, but actually staring with wide eyes and open mouths. He grabbed a tray of food and sat down at his usual table, trying to ignore the attention. Pete Dawson slid into the seat across from him. His friend looked like he hadn't slept all night. Danny, Pete whispered. What did you do? What do you mean? The Cathari ambassador. She was in your quarters for 3 hours last night. Everyone knows. The whole ship is talking about it. Danny choked on his coffee. How does everyone know? Security logs. Someone saw her walking to your room and then leaving much later. People are saying you either seduced her or challenged her to combat. Pete leaned closer. Please tell me you didn't do either of those things. It was an accident, Danny said. He explained about the translator glitch and the wrong message. He told Pete about Bellinara wanting to learn about human humor. By the end of his explanation, Pete was shaking his head in disbelief. Only you, Pete said. Only you could accidentally invite an alien warrior princess to your room and end up teaching her about jokes. Before Danny could respond, a shadow fell over their table. He looked up and found Velanara standing there, her golden eyes fixed on him. "Human Danny Carter," she said. "I wish to continue our discussion from last night. You will accompany me to the observation deck." It was not a request. Danny looked at Pete, who shrugged helplessly. He got up from his seat and followed Velanara out of the mess hall, very aware that every person in the room was watching them leave. The observation deck was a large room at the front of the ship, with windows that showed the endless stars outside. It was usually empty during mealtimes, and today was no exception. Velanara walked to the windows and stood there, her forearms clasped behind her back. "I spent the night thinking about what you told me," she said, "about humor and absurdity. I believe I understand it better now." "That's good," Danny said carefully. He wasn't sure why she had brought him here. "I also thought about why I enjoyed our conversation." Velanara turned to face him. "I have been ambassador for 2 years. In that time, no one has spoken to me the way you did. Without fear. Without trying to gain something from me." Danny didn't know what to say to that. "I was terrified the whole time." "Yes, but you still spoke honestly." "That is rare." Velanara's crest rose slightly. "I find myself curious about you, Danny Carter." "I, Carter? I wish to understand humans better, and I believe you can teach me." Over the following weeks, this became their routine. Velanara would find Danny wherever he was on the ship, and they would talk. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for hours. She asked endless questions about human culture, history, and behavior. Danny did his best to answer, though he often felt completely unqualified for the task in return. Velanara told him about the Cathari. He learned that she had never wanted to be an ambassador. She had been a warrior, one of the best fighters in her clan. She had won 17 single combats and led her unit to victory in 3 border conflicts. "Then why are you here?" Danny asked one evening. They were sitting in the observation deck, watching a nearby nebula glow with pink and purple light. Velanara was quiet for a long moment. "A marriage was arranged for me, to a male from a powerful family. It would have united 2 clans and brought great honor to my parents. But you didn't want to marry him?" "I refused." Velanara's scales flickered to a darker shade of purple. "Among my people, this is a great shame. I was exiled from my warrior unit and assigned to diplomatic service as punishment. They believed it would break my spirit." Danny thought about this. "Did it?" "No." Velanara looked at him with something that might have been a smile. "I have seen more of the galaxy in 2 years than most Cathari see in their entire lives. I have met species my people thought were only legends. I have learned that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than anything I imagined." "Maybe disgrace isn't so bad then," Danny said. "Perhaps not." Her golden eyes held his gaze. "You are strange, Danny Carter. You do not fear me as the others do." Danny considered this. It was true that he had stopped being afraid of her somewhere along the way. He wasn't sure when it had happened. "Should I be afraid? I could kill you in 17 different ways before you could draw your next breath. Yeah, but you won't." "How can you be certain of that?" Danny smiled. "Because you keep coming back. You could talk to anyone on this ship. The captain, the senior diplomats, anyone. But you come to me. That has to mean something." Velanara did not respond immediately. She turned back to look at the nebula, and the colored light played across her scales in beautiful patterns. "It means something," she admitted quietly, "though I am not yet certain what." Meanwhile, the diplomatic negotiations were going badly. The Cathari Empire wanted exclusive mining rights to a system rich in rare minerals. Unfortunately, humanity had already promised partial rights to the Vendari Collective 6 months ago. Neither side was willing to compromise. Danny heard the senior officers talking about it in worried voices. War was starting to seem like a real possibility. The Kethari were powerful, and a conflict with them would cost millions of human lives. They are too proud to accept less than what they want, Valinara told him when he asked about it. And your people are too stubborn to give it to them. It is a situation without a good solution. There has to be a way, Danny said. We can't just let a war happen over mining rights. Valinara looked at him with an expression he had learned to recognize as fondness. You believe everything can be fixed with enough talking. It is a very human attitude. Is that a bad thing? I used to think so, she said. Now I am less certain. Danny didn't know what to do about the negotiations. He was just a junior officer with no power or influence. But he knew one thing for sure. Somewhere along the way, his relationship with Valinara had become the most important thing in his life, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. 6 weeks had passed since the accidental message, and Danny's life had changed completely. He still did his regular duties as a junior liaison officer, but everyone on the ship knew about his strange friendship with the Kethari ambassador. Some people thought he was crazy. Others thought he was brave. Most just thought he was lucky to still be alive. Captain Linda Morrison had called him into her office twice to ask about his relationship with Valinara. Both times, Danny had explained that they were just friends, that Valinara was curious about human culture, and that nothing inappropriate was happening. The captain seemed skeptical, but allowed it to continue. Just be careful, she told him. The Kethari are not like us. What seems like friendship to you might mean something very different to her. Danny thought about those words often. He knew the captain was right to be cautious. But the more time he spent with Valinara, the more he felt like he understood her. She was not the cold, dangerous warrior that the briefing files described. She was curious and thoughtful, and sometimes even funny in her own strange way. One evening, they were walking through the botanical garden that the ship maintained for crew morale. Real plants from Earth grew under artificial sunlight, filling the air with the smell of green things and flowers. Valinara stopped to examine a rosebush, her golden eyes reflecting the red petals. These are beautiful, she said. We have nothing like this on my homeworld. No flowers, no plants at all in most regions. Our world is harsh. Rock and sand and metal. Life, there must be strong or it dies. She reached out one of her 4 hands and touched a petal gently. Your world must be very soft. Danny laughed. Some parts are. Other parts are just as harsh as yours. Humans have learned to survive in all kinds of environments. This is what fascinates me about your species, Valinara said. She turned to face him, and her expression was serious. You are small and weak compared to Kethari. Your bodies are fragile. You have no scales, no claws, no natural weapons. Yet you have spread across the galaxy almost as far as we have. Stubbornness, mostly, Danny said. It is more than that. Valinara's crest rose with interest. I have been watching your crew. They argue with each other constantly. They disagree about everything. Half of them seem to actively dislike the other half. Yet when there is a crisis, they work together perfectly. How is this possible? Danny had to think about that. It was something he had always taken for granted. I guess we're used to it. Humans have always been divided into groups that fight with each other. Countries, religions, political parties. But when something threatens all of us, we put those differences aside. My people cannot do this, Valinara said. When we disagree, we fight until one side wins. The idea of cooperating with an enemy is shameful to us. Maybe that's why you find us confusing. Perhaps. Valinara was quiet for a moment. Danny, may I ask you something personal? Danny felt his heart beat faster. She had never asked to discuss anything personal before. Sure. Do you have a mate? A family waiting for you back on your homeworld? The question caught him off guard. No, mate. My parents are still alive, and I have a sister with 2 children. But no partner of my own. Why not? Danny shrugged. Never found the right person, I guess. I was always more interested in my career, in exploring space. Romance seemed like something that could wait. Velenar nodded slowly. Among my people, pairings are usually arranged by families. Personal preference is considered less important than political advantage. Her scale shifted to a darker color. This is why I refused my arranged marriage. I did not want to spend my life with someone chosen for me by others. You wanted to choose for yourself. Yes, she looked at him directly. I am beginning to understand why this felt so important. Before Danny could respond to that statement, his communication device buzzed with an urgent message. He looked at it and felt his blood run cold. What is wrong? Velenar asked. A new Kethari ship just arrived. Ambassador Kethmara of the High Council is aboard. He's coming to oversee the final negotiations personally. Velenara's entire body went rigid. Her scale shifted to a shade of red that Danny had never seen before. Her crest flattened against her head. No, she whispered. This cannot be happening. You know him? He is the male I was supposed to marry. Velenara's voice was barely audible. He has never forgiven me for refusing him. If he is here, it is not just for the negotiations. He has come for revenge. The next day, Ambassador Kethmara arrived on the Starboard Hope with a delegation of 20 warriors. He was massive, even by Kethari standards, standing over 8 feet tall. His scales were the deep red of the warrior caste, and his forearms were covered in scars from countless battles. Danny watched the greeting ceremony from the back of the room. He could see Velenara standing with the other Kethari diplomats, her posture perfectly formal. But he knew her well enough now to see the tension in her body, the fear she was hiding behind her composed expression. Kethmara's golden eyes swept across the room until they found Velenara. He smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Ambassador Velenara, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. How fitting that we should meet again. I have heard interesting rumors about your time on this human vessel. Ambassador Kethmara, Velenara replied. Her voice was steady, but Danny could see her hands trembling slightly. Welcome aboard. I hope your journey was pleasant. It was long and tedious, but worth it. Kethmara stepped closer to her. I look forward to resolving all outstanding matters between us, one way or another. The threat in his words was clear to everyone in the room. Danny felt a surge of anger that surprised him with its intensity. He wanted to step forward to say something, to protect Velenara somehow. But he was just a junior officer. There was nothing he could do. Not yet anyway. That night, Danny found Velenara in the observation deck. She was standing alone in the darkness, staring at the stars with an expression of deep sadness. He will find a way to destroy me, she said without turning around. It is only a matter of time. Danny walked to stand beside her. Then we'll find a way to stop him. There is no way. He is powerful, and I am disgraced. He will use the law against me, and there is nothing I can do to prevent it. Danny reached out and took one of her hands in his. Her scales were cool against his skin. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, I'm with you. Velenara looked at him, and for the first time, he saw tears in her golden eyes. Why? Why would you risk yourself for me? Because you matter to me, Danny said simply. And I don't give up on people who matter to me. She did not pull her hand away. 3 days after Kethmara's arrival, everything fell apart. Danny was eating lunch in the mess hall with Pete when he heard shouting from across the room. He looked up and saw Kethmara standing near the entrance, his massive frame blocking the doorway. Several of his warriors stood behind him, their expressions cold and dangerous. But Danny's attention was fixed on Velanara. She stood facing Kethmora, her posture defensive, her scales shifting rapidly between colors. "You have brought shame upon our people," Kethmora said. His voice was loud enough for everyone in the mess hall to hear. "You spend your time with these humans. You form attachments with their inferior males. You have forgotten what it means to be Kethari." "I have forgotten nothing," Velanara replied. "I serve my people as an ambassador. What I do with my personal time is my own business." "Your personal time?" Kethmara laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Everyone on this ship knows about your relationship with the human Danny Carter. You have been seen with him constantly. You sit with him. You walk with him. You visit his quarters." A murmur went through the watching crowd. Danny felt his face burn with embarrassment and fear. "There is nothing improper about our friendship," Velanara said. "He has helped me understand human culture, which makes me a better ambassador. Friendship." Kethmora spat the word like it was poison. A Kethari does not form friendships with lesser species. A Kethari does not lower herself to the level of weak, pathetic creatures who cannot even survive a single blow from our hands. He turned his gaze toward Danny, and the hatred in his eyes was terrifying. "I see him there. The human who has corrupted you. He is small and fragile and worthless. How could you possibly prefer his company to mine?" "Perhaps because he treats me with respect," Velanara said quietly. "Something you never did." The mess hall went completely silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Kethmara's scales darkened to a shade of red so deep it was almost black. "You dare speak to me this way?" His voice was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more frightening. "Before witnesses? Before your own people? I speak the truth. You were cruel and controlling. You cared nothing for my wishes or my happiness. You wanted to own me, not to partner with me. That is why I refused you, and I would refuse you again 1,000 times." Kethmara was quiet for a long moment. Then he drew himself up to his full height, towering over everyone in the room. "Then you leave me no choice," he said formally. "Velanara of Clan Thresk, I challenge you. For your insults, for your rejection, for the shame you have brought upon my house. By the ancient laws, I demand satisfaction in combat." The Kethari warriors behind him stamped their feet in approval. This was their way. This was how their people had settled disputes for thousands of years. Captain Morrison pushed her way through the crowd. "This is a human ship. You cannot conduct duels here. By the terms of the diplomatic agreement, Kethari law applies to interactions between Kethari citizens," Kethmara said smoothly. "Ambassador Velanara knows this. She cannot refuse my challenge without being stripped of all rank and status." He turned back to Velanara. "The combat will be to the death, as is our way." Danny watched Velanara's face. He saw the fear there, the hopelessness. But he also saw her pride, her refusal to show weakness in front of her enemy. "I accept," she said quietly. The crowd erupted in noise. Humans shouted in protest. Kethari warriors cheered. Captain Morrison was trying to find some legal way to stop what was happening. But Danny barely heard any of it. He pushed through the crowd until he reached Velanara's side. She looked at him with sad golden eyes. "Do not interfere," she said. "This is between him and me. He'll kill you. Perhaps. But I will not hide from my fate." Later that evening, Danny found Velanara in the cargo bay. She had borrowed a curved blade from one of the other Kethari and was practicing combat forms. Her movements were beautiful and deadly, flowing from one position to the next like water. But Danny could see the doubt in her eyes. She was skilled, but Kethmara was a legendary warrior. He had won dozens of duels. He had killed enemies twice his size. She was brave, but bravery would not be enough. Velanara, Danny said. Stop. Listen to me. She paused her practice, but did not look at him. There is nothing to discuss. The challenge has been made and accepted. Tomorrow I will fight, and probably I will die. What if someone else fought in your place? Now she turned to face him. What? I read the Kethari legal files. All of them. A champion can stand for someone who has been accused of dishonor. If I challenge Kethmar on your behalf, you don't have to fight. Velanara's scales shifted to a pale color he had never seen before. That is not possible. You would die. He would tear you apart in seconds. Maybe. There's no maybe about it. Danny, you are kind and brave, and I care for you more than I should. But you are human. You cannot fight a Kethari warrior and survive. Danny stepped closer to her. I've been watching combat footage for the past 3 hours. Studying his moves. Studying his weaknesses. He has no weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses. His are pride and anger. He fights with emotion, not discipline. When he's frustrated, he makes mistakes. Velanara shook her head. Even if that were true, his mistakes would still be faster and stronger than your best efforts. This is not one of your human stories where the underdog always wins. This is reality. I know it's reality, Danny said. And I know the odds are against me. But I also know that I can't just stand there and watch you die. Not when there's something I can do about it. Why would you do this? Velanara's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you risk your life for me? Danny looked into her golden eyes. He thought about all the conversations they had shared, all the things she had taught him, all the ways she had changed his understanding of the universe. Because you're still here, he said. 6 weeks ago, you walked into my quarters because of a stupid mistake, and you could have killed me. But you stayed. You talked to me. You came back, again and again. You chose me as your friend, and that means something. It means everything, Velanara said softly. Then let me fight for it. Let me fight for you. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I cannot stop you. By Kethari law, any person may volunteer to be a champion. But Danny, please understand what you are doing. If you lose, you die. There is no mercy in Kethari combat. I understand. And you still want to do this? Danny took her hand. I'd rather live for you. But if dying is what it takes, then yeah. I'm willing to take that risk. Velanara squeezed his hand back. A single tear ran down her scaled cheek. Then I will teach you everything I know, she said. We have until tomorrow. It is not much time, but perhaps it will be enough. They trained through the night. The main hangar of the Starboard Hope had been cleared of all equipment. A circular area had been marked on the floor, 20 meters across. This was the dueling ground, and anyone who stepped outside its boundaries would forfeit the match. Both human crew members and Kethari warriors had gathered around the circle. Captain Morrison stood with her senior officers, her face grim. She had tried everything to stop this duel, but Kethari law was clear. A challenge had been issued and accepted. A champion had volunteered. The combat would proceed. Danny stood at one edge of the circle, wearing simple exercise clothes. He had a curved blade in his hand, identical to the one Velanara had used during their training. It felt strange and heavy, nothing like the weapons he had trained with during his military service. Across from him, Kethmar awaited. The Kethari warrior was enormous, over 8 feet tall and covered in thick red scales. His forearms held 2 blades, each one longer than Danny's entire weapon. He was smiling, and the expression made him look like a demon from an old Earth legend. Is this truly the champion you have chosen? Kethmar called out to Velanara, who stood at the edge of the circle with the other observers. This tiny, weak creature? He will provide no sport at all. Valinara said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on Danny, and he could see the fear in them. Fear for him, not for herself. A Cathari elder stepped into the center of the circle. He raised one hand for silence. "The rules are simple," he announced. "Combat continues until one fighter is dead or yields. No weapons other than those already held. No interference from observers. May honor guide your blades." He stepped back out of the circle. Kethmara began walking toward Danny immediately, his movements slow and confident. He was not rushing. He was savoring the moment, enjoying the terror he expected to see in his opponent's eyes. But Danny was not terrified. He was focused. Valinara had taught him many things during their night of training, but the most important lesson was this: he could not win a fair fight against a Cathari. His only chance was to make the fight unfair. When Kethmara came within striking range, he swung one of his massive blades in a horizontal arc. It was fast, faster than Danny had expected. But Danny was not there when the blade arrived. He had already dropped to the ground and rolled to the side. Kethmara turned, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He swung again, this time with both blades in a crossing pattern. Again, Danny was not there. He had moved backward, staying just out of reach. "Stand and fight," Kethmara growled. "Face me like a warrior." Danny said nothing. He continued to move, to dodge, to retreat. Every time Kethmara attacked, Danny was somewhere else. He never tried to block the powerful strikes. He never tried to fight back directly. He simply avoided each blow and kept moving. The Cathari spectators began to murmur. This was not how duels were fought. This was not honorable combat. This was running away. But the human observers saw something different. They saw a smaller, weaker fighter using his size and speed to avoid destruction. They saw someone refusing to play by rules that would guarantee his death. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Kethmara was breathing heavily now. He was not used to extended fights. His victories were usually quick and brutal. This constant chasing, this endless pursuit of an enemy who would not stand still, was exhausting. "Coward," Kethmara spat. "You dishonor yourself with these tactics." "I'm still alive," Danny replied. It was the first thing he had said since the fight began. Kethmara roared with rage and charged forward with all his speed. His blades flashed in a furious pattern of strikes, each one powerful enough to cut Danny in half. But Danny had been waiting for this moment. Anger made people predictable. Anger made people sloppy-dot. As Kethmara overextended on a particularly wild swing, Danny darted inside his guard. His blade flicked out, leaving a shallow cut across the Cathari's left arm. It was not a serious wound, but it was a wound. First blood had been drawn. The crowd gasped. A human had drawn blood from a Cathari warrior in single combat. It was almost unheard of. Kethmara looked at the cut on his arm with disbelief. Then his rage intensified. He attacked again and again, but each time Danny slipped away, and each time the human managed to leave another small cut behind. None of them were deep. None of them were dangerous. But they added up. 20 minutes into the fight, Kethmara was covered in shallow wounds. Blood dripped from his arms and legs and torso. He was moving slower now, his breathing labored. The cuts were not killing him, but they were weakening him. Death by 1,000 small cuts. "Yield," Danny said. He was tired too, but he was not bleeding. He was not slowing down. "Never," Kethmara snarled. He raised his blades for another attack, but his arms were heavy. His movements were slow. When he swung, Danny easily sidestepped and delivered another cut, this one across the back of his knee. Kethmara stumbled. For the first time in the fight, he lost his balance. He went down to one knee, his blades dropping to support himself. Danny moved faster than he ever had before. In an instant, he was standing behind Kethmora, his blade pressed against the Kethari's throat. The hanger went completely silent. "I could kill you right now," Danny said. His voice was calm, despite his racing heart. "But that's not how humans do things. We believe in mercy. We believe in second chances. Yield, and this ends. No more fighting. No more revenge. You go back to your world and never bother Velinara again." Kethmora was silent for a long moment. His pride warred with his survival instinct. The blade at his throat was sharp enough to kill him in an instant. Then, slowly the massive warrior began to laugh. It was not an angry laugh or a mocking laugh. It was a genuine sound of disbelief and wonder. "You impossible creature," Kethmora said. "You were supposed to die in seconds. You were supposed to be an easy kill. Instead, you have defeated me with tricks and patience and sheer stubborn refusal to fight properly. Is that a yield?" Kethmora lowered his head. "Yes, I yield. By the ancient laws, I acknowledge my defeat. The honor debt is paid." Danny stepped back and lowered his blade. His hands were shaking now that the immediate danger was over. He looked across the circle and found Velinara staring at him with an expression he could not quite read. The treaty negotiations resumed the next day, and to everyone's surprise, they went smoothly. Kethmora, humbled by his defeat, proved to be much more reasonable than anyone had expected. A compromise was reached that gave both the Kethari and the Vendari partial mining rights, with humanity serving as a neutral overseer. "You changed him," Velinara told Danny that evening. They were sitting in the observation deck, watching the stars as they always did. "He has never been defeated before. It made him see things differently. He's not so bad when he's not trying to kill people." Velinara made the sound that passed for laughter among her people. "My people will talk about this for generations. The human who defeated a Kethari warrior with nothing but patience and clever feet. Is that a good thing? It is unprecedented." She paused. "I find I enjoy unprecedented things." Danny smiled. He took her hand, and this time she did not pull away. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the colors of the distant nebula. "What happens now?" Danny asked finally. "You'll have to go back with the delegation eventually." "I have been thinking about that." Velinara turned to look at him. "The High Council has offered me a choice. I can return to my homeworld and resume my position as a warrior, with my honor fully restored. Or I can request a permanent posting here as ambassador to the human fleet. What did you decide?" "I decided that I've spent too long running from the things I want." She squeezed his hand. "I am staying, Danny Carter. Someone must ensure you do not accidentally summon any more alien women to your chamber." Danny laughed. "Just the one is enough." "Yes," Velinara agreed. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her scales warm against his skin. "I believe it is." Outside the observation window, the stars continued their endless dance. Somewhere in the vast darkness, two species were learning to understand each other a little better. And in the quiet of the observation deck, a human and a Kethari sat together, holding hands, watching the universe unfold before them. It had all started with an accident. A glitch. A wrong message sent to the wrong person. But sometimes, Danny thought, accidents led to exactly where you were supposed to be.